Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Hello and welcome to episode 195 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Paris and this is Chris.
Hello.
This time we read Mazes and Monsters by Rona Jaffe, a book that was turned into a TV movie starring Tom Hanks during the height of the Satanic Panic over D&D and its evils. This was requested by our patron Luchek, who said, what about the classic horrible D&D book the made-for-TV movie was based on? You know, the one with Tom Hanks. Mazes and Monsters by Rona Jaffe. Looking at the Goodreads, it's really mid, with some loving it and some hating it. We're all role players here, so could be fun. Right you were, Luchek. Quite fun. I was actually wondering if anyone was ever going to request this book due to our, nerd credentials and just its kind of infamy as a book on its own. So thank you for the recommendation. We were actually happy to read this one. Not because we loved it or anything, but just because it is sort of a piece of history in nerddom and bad fiction.
D&D opinions.
Yeah.
I'm drinking my D&T D&D ass tea that I got at PAX East, which is delicious. You should buy some D&T. The American Chill is delicious.
We are not sponsored by D&T, but we could be D&T.
Yeah. Yeah, let's tag them in the episode description on this one.
Like, I'm not below working for tea. That fucking rules. I'd work for tea. Yeah,
I'm a supporter of the two flavors I've tried. They've got a bunch more. I'm excited to try the rest of them. But even if they all suck.
Tell us about Underdark and Chill.
Oh, well, it's an Earl Grey blend with lavender and vanilla and citric acid and malic acid. It's a wonderful blend.
Those are just preservatives, but that's fine. And then what about Cozy Cottage?
That's a delicious chamomile blend. There's like some dried apple in there too, so you get like a little tiny bit of like appliness in with there. I don't have the ingredients list on hand over here, but I'm not I wasn't a chamomile guy, and now within like a week of buying, it's like I gotta have my nightly Cozy Cottage.
Yo, speaking of like D&D themed tea, my bassist Don very kindly got me some really high grade chamomile for Christmas, like not this past one, the one before. And at first I was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm out of chamomile. And dude, 2 cups of that shit knocked me the fuck out. I was like, damn, that was way more powerful. Like, if you get the real stuff, it was like the real chamomile bud, all
yeah, the sticky icky. It's the really crystals.
I actually, seriously though, it was like yellow and puffy, and it wasn't that dried dust shit, and it was from like Many Worlds Tavern or End of the World. I think it's some kind of D&D also themed. I think they have cats and stuff too. So yeah, man, getting like solid tea with the actual herbs that aren't just like dried dust is a change you should make in your life.
I agree. Okay, well, we're talking about a book here.
Another change you should make is sponsoring us, D&D or Many Worlds Tavern.
All right, let's get back to it, Paris. I think you were...
What do we normally do? We don't normally review tea on this show. If this is your first time listening to this show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is we read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, like Luchek, other listeners or friends recommend. So we typically do the opposite of what most people do when they are in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet and looking for something to read. Typically, this experiment results in a hilariously disappointing read, but once in a while, we do actually end up liking or even loving the book in rare cases. In addition to our usual barnyard language today and perhaps too much discussion about tea, today's episode does unfortunately include kind of a menagerie of some rough stuff. We've got serious mental illness, attempted rape, stabbing, underage drug and alcohol use, addiction, child sex trafficking. I mean, it's kind of it's really, they're packing all the scared straight stuff into one book. Like Rona was like, this is my shot. I'm just going to cram it all in there.
I can get this happening on Lifetime, even though it didn't happen on, I think it was like an NBC production that is what we had here. Did you know that this was Tom Hanks' first lead role?
I did know that. That's actually how I just remember someone saying or reading it somewhere a long time ago and being like, huh, weird. And at the time, I actually didn't know that it was sort of like an anti-D&D, anti-fantasy role-playing novel and film until I was older. But I haven't seen it yet. I think Chris and I are actually going to watch it for patrons, so hopefully that has already happened and it is dropped by the time this episode comes out, because we've never seen it, so what a time. I think
it's going to be a little bit of a challenge finding a copy to watch, to be honest with you.
Oh, we can do it. I trust in the internet. And if we can't find it, we'll reach out to our glorious listeners and they'll help us out. I know it. All right. Chris, why don't you read the back of the book summary? You know, how was Rona pulling us in all those years ago in the 80s? Give us our characters and setting, and then I will read the plot summary Chris wrote, and we write these so that you can generally understand the main beats of the story, so that when we're actually reviewing it and talking about what we liked and didn't like, you have some context and you're not just out there unmoored in the seas of bad literature. Chris, take it away.
Part thriller, part love story, Mazes and Monsters is a spellbinding novel about a group of college students in the 1980s who use a fantasy game as refuge from their personal, emotional, and social problems. Based loosely on the steam tunnel incidents of the 1970s, the four friends, Kate, JJ, Daniel, and Robbie, eventually take their game too far when they decide to live-action roleplay in the caverns near their college campus. What follows is terrifying and unexpected as each character dives deep into the darkest part of their mind, those forbidden places where our most menacing truths lie.
Is it a love story, Chris? All right.
Well, there's a lot of sex. There's a lot of like being obsessed with everyone's sex lives, so I guess.
I guess. All right.
All right, so for our characters and setting, we're mostly set at Grant's, is it college or university?
I think it's Grant University, I think.
That's in Pequod, Pennsylvania.
Which is not a real place, but there is a place with a very similar name. It's called Pequay, Pennsylvania, and it's spelled almost the same. So I think that's what the author was going for.
Yeah, and there's a brief section where all the characters go home for the holidays. So you get Brookline, Massachusetts.
There are two. Excuse me, Chris. I take issue with this. There are two far too long sections about Christmas break and spring break, and I did not need that. So.
The book is also weirdly obsessed with mentioning we're in Brookline, Massachusetts. Did you know that we're in Brookline right now? None of the other characters, it really hits that hard about where the fuck they are. But they're like, it's Brookline, a suburb of Massachusetts. Brookline ain't a suburb. It's just herb.
Chris, I think it's just a little weird. Like, hey, we want you to know this character is Jewish. Let's tell you that they're from this extremely Jewish spot. But that, which is a weird thing to want to do, especially when later in the book they just talk about how, Daniel brings what do you call, what's a non-Jewish woman that a Jewish man dates, a shista or what, shishka bob?
Shiksa. Yes, the shish kebab. You brought another shish kebab home?
Sorry, I really could not remember the word. You brought shishka. What are you going to do? Is she going to convert? Like, they have that conversation. So It is really weird that this author will not stop talking about Brookline. Was not expecting that.
As someone that works in Brookline regularly, like, I kind of get why you might feel the sort of snooty type comes from there. It's not unreasonable to think that, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, in addition to having a fairly large Jewish population, it also has a lot of, like, pretty wealthy people, and this is not me saying that those two groups are the same. I'm trying to be clear here. We're not engaging in any conspiracy theories. We just live here. I don't know. Brookline's like one of the few places where you can still find people having like single family, like nice big homes with like gardens and yards and stuff, which is pretty
it's like
rare.
They're in Newton, right?
Yeah, they're in Newton. Some parts of Brighton. Oh, and like that whole Dead Space, like where there's no trains because of racism. There's actually a bunch of like farmland and like nice single family houses like over in the Mattapan area. So yeah, that does exist in Boston, but it's sort of in these little pockets, and Brookline's one of them. So it's a pretty nice spot.
Hard to get to.
It is hard to get to. The Green Line is very slow and is not close. Anyway.
Yes.
MBTA discussion. You can always come here for that.
It's always going to happen a little bit. Anyway, that's where it takes place. Our characters are Robbie, also known as Pardieu, the Holy Man.
What
Holy
is
Man
that
being
name?
a class.
Pardieu.
Vaguely French, I think. Holy Man is just, it's a cleric. For some reason, we can't use the word cleric for some reason.
We can't use any of the actual D&D terms. We have to make
Except
weird...
fighter. Fighter is a class.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Kate is Glacia the fighter, so she's using the fighter class.
Pardieu is literally a French exclamation that, Pardieu! By God! That's what it means.
All right, that's kind of cute for a D&D character name.
It's like oh no, kind of an interjection.
Yeah. We have Daniel, who was the original Maze controller, which is just the DM, who later plays the character Nimble the Charlatan. And then we have JJ, who is the second Maze controller when they actually go into the caverns, and was Freelick the Sprite in the original game before he purposefully kills his character to somehow convince everyone to go into the caverns to play a new adventure module that he comes up with.
Yeah.
And then fucking everyone's parents, for some reason, like lot of time is spent on every parent and step parent and how the
get
kids'
their own
relationship
chapters.
is.
It's too much.
It's a full section of, it's the second quarter of the book is just like, let's meticulously investigate the emotional state and marriage and sex life of all of the parents.
Yeah, that was a really puzzling inclusion for me. My skim levels were turned up to 11 in that part. I was just like, okay, read some words, page.
We'll get into that when we're starting to do the rubric here, but it was a lot of parents for some reason.
I can't even remember them. There were so many parents. Alan was Kate's dad. Meg was maybe her mom. It doesn't matter.
Was Robbie's mother, and like perhaps the parents you should have spent the most time on were Robbie's parents. But
right.
Okay, moving on from there. Let's get into our summary before we start going over this whole thing. So you guys have some context about what the hell we're talking about here. Oh
man, yeah, this is a bit of a long one, guys. So I would say buckle up, but get your laces strapped into your LARPing costumes. All right. Daniel, Kate, and JJ are friends studying at Grant University in the fictional town of Pequod, Pennsylvania. They love to get together to play mazes and monsters, and they want a new fourth group member since their last party member flunked out of school, and therefore they could never play together or see each other again since he dropped out. Luckily, Robbie just started going to Grant, and he happens to run across JJ in the cafeteria, who invites him to his Brigitte Bardot birthday party, as in, it's the actress Brigitte Bardot's birthday, and he's throwing a party about her, and it's not even his birthday, and she's not involved at all. I don't know. JJ's a little weird, and he's explicitly into older women. But Robbie takes a liking to him, and especially Kate. They briefly discuss how they all play Mazes and Monsters, so he's excited to join the party to get to know Kate better, of course. Their crew plays pretty frequently. Like, we're talking 2 to 5 times a week for many hours.
That's a real good scheduling to happen there,
How do you have that much time? Anyway, Daniel is the DM. MC, the maze controller. Definitely not the dungeon master. That is until JJ decides he's gonna unalive himself one night by going into the caverns near campus since he feels detached from his friends. Once he gets there, though, he realizes that the caverns would be an awesome LARP experience, so he cans the whole death thing and goes back to the dorms to start writing up his in-real-life Mazes and Monsters module, and convinces the gang that it's a swell idea to go into the dark, unmapped caverns. Honestly, it does sound kind of dope. I agree. Robbie...
Yeah. I would totally be down if there was some safety protocols.
Yeah. If we had, like harnesses and a rope system or something so it wouldn't die, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Robbie and Kate start a romantic relationship while this is all happening. Everyone goes home for Christmas break, and we get to hear about everyone's parents' sex lives, emotional states, and marriages for just 20% of this book. And it is a huge waste of time. This is supposed to be an emotional backdrop for the rest of the story. Particularly, the one important part is that we learn that Robbie's brother, Hall, a name people have apparently, disappeared a few years ago. Everyone in the family feels guilt over it, especially Robbie. We return to Grant University and the game after break, where we witness Robbie slowly losing his grip on reality after having dreams about his brother coming to him as the Great Hall and giving his character Pardue a holy mission to, find him, I guess, by becoming, quote-unquote, the highest level of holy man. We can't say cleric, I don't know. Robbie's holy mission leads him to celibacy, so he breaks up with Kate because he can't fuck her anymore and she's sad about it. But they remain really friendly. They continue to play Mazes and Monsters in the Caverns. Everyone loves JJ's emceeing, even Daniel, who was jealous at first. Eventually, Daniel and Kate realize their feelings for each other. However, Robbie has a full mental break and runs off to New York during spring break, convinced he is Pardue, and he will find the Great Hall somewhere near the Two Towers. Yes, those are the ones.
Yeah, you know which one they're talking about or using as a symbol here.
The rest of the gang becomes very worried when they return after spring break to find that Robbie's room is undisturbed, and they call his parents to find out he actually never went home. They go to the police and search the caverns, but Robbie isn't found. Meanwhile, it turns out Robbie is just living rough in New York as Pardue. His delusion leads him to the Street of Messengers, which is just a street where underage sex workers congregate to look for work. One well-meaning sex worker assumes he's one too and offers him some advice. Robbie is propositioned by a man. They go to a hotel room and Pardue stabs him, Robbie Pardue, thinking he is a succubus, although really incubus would have been the right word. This pulls Robbie out of his mental break, and he calls his friends to tell them he's lost in New York and has amnesia and doesn't know what's happened. They come at once to help find him, but since he's not at the shelter they told him to go to, they, I don't know, fuck off and go to the zoo and eat sushi and shit for like a week. Because, I don't know, I guess it's not enough of an emergency, even though it very clearly was. Robbie is sort of fading in and out of the Pardue character, but eventually is lucid enough to meet up with everyone else. They get him home to his parents, but when they visit him later, they find he is still convinced he is Pardue. Don't play Mazes and Monsters ever, kids. It'll ruin your life.
Okay, so I think pretty decent summary of what's going on. We did, skip over the strict spelling out of all the parents' lives, but ultimately we don't have to get too deep into that, I think.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it was clearly edited for, grammar and sentences and stuff. I mean, the writing was, it was very simple. It was sort of like, this is for kids in 9th grade who are just figuring out who they are, and maybe they just learned how to say fuck, like that's kind of the vibe I got from this book.
In terms of technical construction,
like a young
this is what
adult
we're talking about here.
flavor,
So there's the little blue, like little rubric staying there, just so I have a place to put it. But yeah, this is a 1, right?
Yeah,
it's actually laid out well enough. I appreciated the fact that the book was broken out into 4 distinct subsections, because when I realized part 2 was the cataloging of the parents' lives, I could really engage the skim protocol when I realized that was only going to have so much to do with the broader plot.
Yeah, I don't know. I might quibble a little bit about this, because the thing I hated about that was like, I appreciate when books divide things up, but I did not like they restarted the chapter numbering for each part. So I just felt like I was trapped in a horrible loop in the fucking caves, never to escape, because I was still on chapter 1 and chapter 2. It's like, yes, I know it's a different part, but just continue the chapter numbering. You don't need to start over again.
Yeah, like when you're citing this book, it's going to be really hard to be like chapter 2, but from part 3. You gotta do like Bible style citation. Mazes and Monsters 2:1467.
Yeah, man, like no one's doing that, first of all. So let's just make it easy. I don't know. So yeah, it was written by a person who had clearly written before, but the style of writing felt a little young adult to me. It didn't feel particularly special or I don't know, good. Anyway.
Would you give that a 1 or a 0 then?
I'll be kind and give it a 1.
Yeah, I'm always going to
after Scott Adams, I'm feeling a little generous.
So that's a 1 right there. So So that means we can move into plot construction and content layout here.
That doesn't make sense. This should not say content layout because we talk about that in technical construction. So plot construction, talking about plot.
Yeah, there we go. How about coherence of our own fucking show here? We get that together.
Fine, don't worry about it.
So yeah, we like to start off with general coherence here. So I think it just really falls apart around the idea of how Robbie has his mental break and become convinced he's Pardue. I'm no trained psychologist, but it really just reads like Satanic Panic level stuff about how these damn games can seduce children and young adults into a life of fantasy when we aren't doing the 9-to-5 American dream. How dare you not contribute to society in exactly the expected ways? Like, you could still have a fucking job and have a family and everything, but God forbid you're engaging in a little bit of fun pretend with friends.
Yeah, like, honestly, if you just wanted to write a book about sort of what it's like to go to college and have your first couple of relationships and make friends and like some of the social pressures and like academic pressures you have to deal with and stuff, that's fine. Like, it's sort of read like a Sweet Valley High, like when they go to college. Like, that's kind of what this felt like at the beginning.
Yeah, okay.
Except the big exception being whenever they talked about mazes and monsters, they always talked about it like it was like illegal. They were like, we can't talk about it over the phone. Like, what is somebody tapping the phones, guys? Like,
they're rolling dice and pretending to be elves in there. Move, go.
Yeah, and then
I have a warrant. I heard you're playing pretend elf games in here.
And they're like, wow, it's so addictive. Like, I really want to make sure I don't stop studying at school. And it's like, I've never met anyone so addicted to D&D that they do nothing else. I don't know. It's kind of weird. So other than these little blips of like talking shit about role-playing games and like treating them like they're like some kind of illegal drug that will kill you if you do it once.
Like weed. They're
smoking weed
though everyone's
all over the
rolling
place.
joints all the time.
Yeah, everyone's fine.
They're
with
high
that.
as fuck the whole time, bro.
I do think it's funny that the author, never takes a second to talk about like the evils of weed, which I guess I appreciate, right? Considering this was written in the 80s, I'm like, well, that's kind of refreshing that she wasn't like, all these fucking
They're
kids.
regularly drinking and smoking weed, and it's treated like totally normal, but it's the mazes and monsters that seems to be the thing that everyone needs to put under wraps. They're like doing joints in front of like parents, and they're not concerned about hiding it in the dorms.
And also, like, something to keep in mind is 2 of the kids are like graduated high school early. So JJ is 16 and I think Daniel is 17 maybe.
Yeah.
Or something. Or maybe he's just a little, I forget. But in any case, you have people who are very underage, smoking weed, drinking alcohol. And yeah, that's just sort of not, there's no messages about that, which again, I kind of appreciated that, like, we weren't.
That's fine. It's just weird that you're being this odd about D&D.
It's very incongruous, right? Because you would think if you're so concerned about the evils of role-playing games, you would also be concerned about kids in their teenage years doing, mind-altering substances. But I guess not. I don't know. I guess it's weird because I feel like I'm glad. Part of me is glad, but then the other part of me is like, why do you think a game is more dangerous than that? I don't know. I just don't quite get it. Also, somehow the kids, they're smoking weed and drinking, but like everyone's like able to do it at just the right amount. Like no one has any issues. It's like totally fine. Everyone does all their work and no accidents happen. Nothing bad goes down. Like, I don't know. It's really
it's
weird.
It's the throwing dice and pretending to be an elf that are really the danger here that we should all be concerned about.
Yeah, those dice, man, they really
I'm still
hurt
just
when you step
imagining
on
like
them.
the police officer like division that's like, we gotta crack down on these like mazes and monsters games that the kids are throwing themselves off cliffs and caverns, and they like bust into some dorm room where there's like 3 nerds like rolling dice and eating chips, and one of the nerds is desperately trying to like hide the bong, and they're like, we don't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
Show us the dice.
Yeah, it is really a bit confusing. And then, as you said, the whole plot point, the like pivotal point of, well, one of them disconnects from reality and has like a mental break. I don't actually understand how the game had anything to do with that, because Robbie is clearly dealing with the trauma of his older brother being addicted to some pretty heavy drugs like heroin and stuff, and running away from home a couple of times, and finally he like takes like $1,100 from Robbie and fucking pieces out forever and just like never comes back. And it's fucked Robbie up because he was little when it happened. I think he was like 12 or 13 or something. And it was the 70s, so it's not like he went to therapy or anything. His mom was also a drunk too, or an alcoholic, I should say. Yeah, so his mom's an alcoholic. His brother is doing heavy drugs and like running away from home and stealing money from him and stuff, and he's fucked up about it, and he's never really dealt with it. And then he just starts having dreams where in the dream is like framed around fantasy, like the context of the game, because in the dream he sees his like dream brother and he calls him Pardue and stuff. And so the dreams are really structured around the game, but nothing in the game causes him to have a break with reality. It's not like they're playing and then he never gets out of character. Like, he's just having his own little independent dream stuff, and the rest of the kids are fine. Like, nothing ever happens to them. So I don't quite get it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I also feel like it wouldn't happen this quickly. In the book, it is presented as though he has a dream, immediately starts drifting, and then has another dream and he's like fucking gone forever. Like, it's like 2 dreams and he's like, peace, I'm done with this reality. And you're just like, damn, that felt a little rushed. And
like a snap change into like full split personality mode,
right?
Which to me, like, I know this was written in the 80s. We were far less sensitive and understanding about things like this and how they work. But I hate it when it's like the clear split personality and there's amnesia involved. I think if you're having again, no psychologist, if you're having a mental break about like this, it's like a slow reframing over time.
Right.
And even then, like, you're probably not thinking I'm literally Pardue. It's just like cues you're taking from role playing, the characters slowly start drifting into your real life personality. Like, you might not actively think I'm Pardue the holy man, but you like kind of vibe with some of the ideas when you're like, I should be holier. I should be closer to God. I kind of like how I feel when I'm doing that in the game. Maybe I should try to implement some of those things in real life. Right. I should eat better. I should abstain from sex. I should go to save my brother. Like over time, not like a month or two into playing some D&D for a bit.
Well, and he had already been playing the game for a while, and there was also no acute incident that caused the break either, because I know
not even in the caverns, right?
No.
Like, it's not like when they went into the caverns, like JJ put something up that was so realistic,
right,
that Robbie like was pushed further into it.
JJ even says that like the monsters didn't even exist. They were just invisible, and they were like stabbing at nothing, like when they were pretending to fight things. So yeah, it is impossible for me to accept this as plausible. It's not like, I'm not even talking possible. Like, it doesn't even seem possible to me, really. Like, for someone to for as described, for this to play out, like, just doesn't make any sense. It was very hard to stick with the book at that point.
I just never liked the immediate change. Now mental illness has turned on, and like everything is different all at once.
Like that again, and that can happen when something acute happens to you. Like, you go through an extremely traumatic event, and that can push someone who had already been developing some tendencies into a place where those things are a lot more forward in their life. But that didn't happen here. And we're not saying like, oh, all mental or physical illness looks the same, but it's when you're writing a book like this and you're trying to convince the reader that a game is so evil that it's going to turn your children, I guess, schizophrenic or something, like, you got to do a little bit more to convince me. And also, I don't like the idea that because your child has a mental illness, they are therefore broken, and it is a bad thing for your child to have a mental illness. It's it's just, plenty of people have mental illnesses. It doesn't make them worse people or broken people. They're just different, and they have to go through life differently. I really don't like this idea that, the worst thing that can happen to my child is is developing X condition, whether it's, I don't know, depression or, autism or whatever. It's like parents, I feel, they're like, oh no, the worst thing that could happen to my kid is this. It's like, what if your kid is just, if your kid's a good student or whatever, like is having a good life and is happy, maybe just let them vibe. Maybe don't treat them like like they're broken because they have something that they can't control happening to them. So yeah, I really don't like cautionary tales like this because it just feels a lot like, I don't know, it feels like a little bit like a dusting of eugenics over the top of things, which I don't love.
Little light flavor on top there. And it's like, you can tell it's not like any serious research was done into how mental breaks like this happen. And even there's some language in the book about like one of the parents like does work with neurodivergent children, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
And the way she talks about it is like, wow, I'm so generous. Like, there's a line about like, it feels like I'm doing social work even though I'm being paid. And I'm like, what do you mean? It doesn't count as social work if you get paid to provide a service for some people?
Dude, that passage was so heinous. I should read it. I mean, it's going to be awful. There's going to be an audio clip of me saying this out in the world, but I am just reading from a book. Please do not take this as endorsement. We just need you to know how gross this was. Okay. This is when they're home for Christmas break and Daniel's home with his family. And his parents are talking about like their next career moves, and the mother says, I had a small triumph myself, his mother said. She was trying to act casual, but Daniel could see how excited she was. You remember Kevin, the little black boy in my class who was almost autistic? The one with the alcoholic mother, the father who disappeared? Dr. Franck kept telling me, autism is chemical, Ellie. You're not going to get through to that child. But I wouldn't give up. I said, look at that traumatic home life. Some children are more fragile than others. Kevin is one of the fragile ones. She took a sip of wine and smiled. Well, this morning, he was smearing away with his finger paints, and just as I handed him the cobalt blue, he spoke. What did he say? Daniel asked, fascinated. April is the cruelest month, his father said wryly. Don't be silly, Harold. He said no. Well, that's good, Andy said. You're darn right it's good, his mother said. He could have pushed the blue paint away or just used it passively, but he had a preference and he made a choice. And he verbalized it. I know he can talk. He has an entire vocabulary just waiting to explode out of him, but it takes time, and I'll give him that time.
Are we supposed to find her to be patronizing? Like, is that the point, do you think?
Maybe you're right. Maybe that is the point, but it is very hard to tell. And also, why did this need to be here? Why do we need to hear about this at all? This story, I know the author's trying to make a point that, like, people's home life shapes them. Like, fucking no shit, dude. Like, why do we need to be at the dinner table while mom is, like, thinking that, trying to tell everyone she's a saint for helping, for doing her job that she agreed to do. And I don't know. I just don't like the whole saviorism shit.
To be clear, a lot of social work is saintly work in some ways, I would say.
Sure,
but when you're sipping wine and like kind of putting it this way, it's patronizing.
Yeah, it's fucking gross. And I also, there's just a lot there that I'm not a fan of. I'm sure listeners understand. Anyway, and there's just a lot of passages, so much time spent on things that really, to me, did not help support the main story. Way too much time spent with parents and backstory. And it's funny because we've read some books where we're like, oh man, we really want more backstory. But with this one, way overboard.
Too much in the other direction.
Way overboard on the backstory.
Like, do I really need to know the nitty gritty of like Kate's dad getting together with like a younger woman?
Yeah. And like you can show background color like this in shorter vignettes, in memories people have. You don't need to spend 20% of a book on it. Unless, maybe if we're reading like a Steven Erikson 1,200 page, multiple timelines.
You're really spinning it out into that shit, maybe.
But this is like a book you find at the grocery store. This does not need this. And honestly, I was really having trouble paying attention. There was some hard skimming. We were on that reading bus again, skimming hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so this is kind of segueing, I think, into character quality here. And I do want to say that I think this is a strength for Rona here, but in the way that there was a +1 modifier for those skill checks instead of like a -3 for some other ones.
Yeah.
Like, the main party is done fairly okay.
Yeah.
I particularly kind of like JJ's character, especially. He's eccentric. He's a little bit less emotionally mature, but he still has these moments of maturity where he's like, he's also into Kate a little bit. And
everyone's into
jealousy.
Kate because no male can be friends with a female without being into her, you see?
Yeah,
sorry.
That whole fucking thing. But like, he sees Robbie kind of dating her first, and then it was Daniel. He's like, oh, I guess that, it's probably not going to happen for me. He doesn't like really stew on it. He's just like, not going to happen for me. I have pleasure in my D&Ding. And like, I'm like, actually, that's kind of a cool, healthy take to take away. Like, I can just be happy doing other shit too. And like, I just like that he is kind of done that way. He's a little eccentric because he's younger, but he takes some things on the nose. Kate is a bit too wrapped up in like, it feels like the female character here, they're like, okay, well, we have to put her in the context of sex and love. Like, that's the only thing I can write about with
like, because at first I was like, oh, sick, the woman is the fighter. That's kind of rad. But then, nope. She's just...
Kate's whole story is about how her different relationships with boys and the incident in the laundry room where she's almost sexually assaulted. Like, that is her character.
Although the laundry room incident also was weird to me in terms of, like, I don't know, the plot and everything, because I was like, well, that's code for sexual assault, right? But then you find out that some guy turned the lights off in the laundry room while she was in it, and he chased her around, and then he ran away. And yes, it is scary, but I was like, why? I don't know. There was so much tension in the earlier part of the book talking about the incident in the laundry room, and then once we actually find out what happened, it's kind of, I don't know, it's not really what I thought had happened, and she acts as though it's such a pivotal moment in her life until that point. I'm like, yes, it's terrifying. Don't get me wrong. Like, I too have had scary moments like that, but it didn't like rock me to my core and like change my outlook on life. And wasn't she...
that could be, I mean, but if you're otherwise sheltered, right? Like an incident like that to like shake you out of like, oh, I'm not just 100% safe all the time. I have to think about this. That can be very mind altering.
And the book did use that to make a very good point. There's a passage where someone was talking about like, well, what do we do? And they're like, well, surely they'll hire a security guard. She was like, no, a woman has to die or be raped for that. And I was like, fuck, she is absolutely right. Like, there is no security protocol is engaged until something, quote unquote, actually happens, because we are only reactive in this country and not proactive. So there were some nuggets of like real, truth and, some hard truths in here, I think. I did appreciate sort of the back and forth between like some people who didn't want to get married again, but I don't know, there was still kind of a lot on marriage, and the inevitability of marriage and children seemed pretty strong.
And like starting a family is a given kind of thing. Even Daniel, who was the one person who was like, I don't know about that right now, and his mom is like, oh my God, you're not giving me grandchildren. Like, Daniel's storyline, his character arc is like, he's kind of the golden boy in some ways, because like, oh, he's good at computers, so he's going to make us the money.
He's also really hot, as the book tells us many times.
Yeah, he's got a sexy mouth.
Sexy mouth. And his blonde eyes.
Blonde eyes and green hair.
Yeah, whatever. And his point, does he have the cute pointed face? No, that's JJ. Weird. Yeah, sexy mouth. He's got a sexy mouth. Rona really wants us to know about that sexy mouth.
It's mentioned many times how sexy weird. The mouth is, weird. Really. So I don't. And Robbie's the one where like we are supposed to have more depth, but I wouldn't say we have nuance at all.
Yeah, like I guess I would say I appreciate the attempt, but it didn't go far enough, and I just don't think this author. I don't know that she had enough of a connection with younger people at the time. And I'm guessing that her youth experience was not similar to this, so maybe it was hard for her to write from her own perspective. But yeah, I don't know. Like, some of it seemed okay, but some of it seemed really off the mark. It was really a half and half deal where it was like, sometimes this feels realistic and sometimes... Okay, but was some of this just because it was the 1970s, Chris? I have questions for you about the 1970s. So...
I wasn't alive, but I'll do my best.
So in the 1970s, this book leads us to believe that putting perfume on light bulbs will make a room smell different. Can you do that? Can you rub perfume on a light bulb and have the heat disperse the smell? Is that how chemistry works?
Maybe because like perfume is water based, not oil based, right? Like that. Which one is it?
No, it's usually well,
there's like, you have like a oil melter like for like candles or what,
that's true,
those,
but like
diffusers.
Smearing perfume on like a hot light bulb just doesn't sound like a great plan to me. I don't know. I was really taken aback by that. Also, the idea that JJ has a mina bird and a space heater in his dorm room. Like,
I think I'd throw the space heater out before the mina bird if I was like a dorm RA or whatever.
But I mean, they're both, the space heater, a danger. It's danger to all, especially in the 70s before they had like auto tip over shut off. And what college is like, yeah, bring your exotic bird to school, please.
But also they're like smoking joints freely and shit and drinking in the dorm, so I don't know, there like probably just isn't any oversight.
Yeah, like there's never an RA. Like, do they just not have,
I guess not
any oversight? This is like another thing in the book that just seemed weird to me. I was like, what? Yeah, what school is like, yeah, whatever, smoke and drink, do whatever you want, have exotic birds and space heaters.
Bring the mina bird in here. Whatever.
Yeah,
Party.
I don't know. It was the 70s. Who knows? Shit. And there was something else. Oh, I guess.
Call in, boomers.
Yeah. This is, I guess this is, I don't know if this is the 70s or just this author, but can we talk about the names in this book? So, all right. There's two big name sins in this book. Okay, one of them is that Robbie's brother who disappeared, ran away. His name is Hall. And every time I saw it, I was like, oh, that has to be Hal. Because no one is named Hall. No. It was Hall.
Arsenio Hall.
That's a last name. This is a first name. I'm saying
someone's named Hall.
It's a very common surname, but not a first name. So I was like, so the whole book I was like, Hal.
Hello, I'm Hall. I'm double Hall.
I was like, okay, it has to be Hal, and they just have an extra L. So I'm calling this guy Hal. And then they're in college, and they're staying in like East Hall or Hall East. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I was like, damn, you could have named the brother anything else. Why would you name him Hall, like a hallway, especially when they're going to be talking about East Hall? It was just sort of unnecessary, like needlessly confusing. And I was like, why did she do this? This is so dumb. You could have called that brother Patrick, Bob.
Well,
fucking anything.
I think the justification is so that when he had his mental break and he was going around New York City asking people about the Great Hall, there was a reason for everyone not to go like, I don't know that guy. Oh, you mean the building? So like he would get further and further away. Like people weren't questioning him too hard about that.
That's the
only reason I can think of.
It's so fucking
really
stupid.
Unnecessary. I also want to remind you that he was Hall Jr. The dad was also Hall. So I guess he got a stupid name and he was like, I'm not the only one that's going to have to deal with this.
Yeah, we're also going to make sure we got our daughter window and like...
This is my son room. Have you met my nephew vestibule?
Oh, and poor little closet. It's so strange. Like, oh, crown molding, my good sister. I just don't. Yeah, and just for that very forced convention at the end where people mistake him for talking about a building, and then when he's leaving notes, people get confused and think he's talking about a building. But then, fucking, I almost called her Karen. Kate figures it out right away. She's like, oh, his brother's name was Hall. It's not even a point of confusion. So Rona, why? This was very silly. Second naming sin. All right, so we're in the part.
That's good. I love this one, actually.
All right, I'm going to set the scene for you. All right, it is last night. It is about 1:45, 2 a.m. I have been trying to power through and finish this book so I could wake up in 6 hours and record this episode. I had the Northeast Dungeon Siege stream on because I couldn't go this year. I was like, I got some incense, trying to just really keep my spirits up through this book. The siege is over, so I have no more dulcet dungeon tones, just alone in my house with the cat. It's almost 2 a.m., and I'm at the part of the book where things are serious. Robbie has gone missing. He's had a complete break with reality. All of his friends, Kate, Daniel, JJ, they're all really freaked out, terrified, trying to get the police to believe them that something is wrong and that they should look for him. And, again, this is like the serious part of the book. And in walks our resident cop, Lieutenant Martini. I laughed out loud and punched my couch because I just couldn't take it. I was like, Rona, this is what Miss Jaffe, Lieutenant Martini. I read that and I was like, does this guy also like strip on the weekends? Like Lieutenant Martini.
For me, it had big like DM desperately trying to come up with a name on the spot energy when the player characters are like, okay, we're gonna, what's that cop's name again? And like you never expected them to go anywhere near the town guards. You're like, Lieutenant Martini at your service.
So I guess finally an element of realism that we can appreciate. But yeah, so it was absolutely impossible to take the very serious end part of the book seriously because they're always talking to Lieutenant Martini, talking about him. Also, Lieutenant Martini questions kids underage without consent of their parents, which is I'm pretty sure was illegal even in the 70s, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, they let you do whatever.
Because remember, JJ's 16, and I think at least one other person in this group is like got into college early, and they're not even 18. So yeah, ridiculous. And then it further descends into silliness because, again, in this serious end section of the book, so after we've dealt with Lieutenant Martini, the kids on their own find notes maps he left, maybe? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
they find
maps that he was drawing of like his own maze in his mind.
Yeah, so Robbie left these somewhere. I think were they in the caves or something? I don't remember.
Yeah.
So they find them, they interpret them, and immediately realize that he must have gone to New York to look for his brother because he writes, like, I have to go to the Two Towers to find the Great Hall. And Kate's like, oh, Hall was his brother's name because everyone else is like, what's the great, what's this building, whatever. So there you go. Which also all feels very, they're in rural Pennsylvania. I don't really know. Like why New York City would be, I guess the Two Towers was their only clue.
Yeah.
so they're like, well, he must have gotten there somehow. This is the age when people were hitchhiking all the time and it was very normal practice. So whatever. They're terrified for their friend. They think he could be dead. They think he could be really hurt because they know he maybe isn't really living in the real world at this point in his mind. So they immediately drive down there like right away. I think, did they bring the fucking bird?
They do, because they can stay at JJ's apartment, which is like a lavish luxury thing. I want to be clear, like Robbie called, like he had broken out of his like mental state after stabbing that guy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
And that's why they knew he was in New York.
Thank you. You're right. They don't even figure it out. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that, yeah, you're right. Sorry. I was delirious. I was up to like almost 3. Sorry, I take that all back. They did not figure it out. But they did read the maps. I thought they had figured that out.
Yeah, they did read the maps, and like Kate is like, I think the Two Towers might be the World Trade Center, but they're like, there's no way we could possibly prove. Like, they're like kind of thinking about it, and then Robbie actually does call them.
You're right.
They spring into action from there.
After he accidentally prostitutes himself due to a misunderstanding, and
yes,
stabs a guy who tries to have sex with him. Or tries to rape him. Let's be real. That was definitely an assault. And he, it snaps him out of everything, and he has amnesia. He calls them. Then they rush over with the bird in tow. Merlin the Mina bird. Never forget Merlin. And they get there, and when he calls them, they're JJ's like, "Hey, I know about the shelter," because he's from there. So he's like, "Hey, go here." Like, I don't know, my mom donates to there or something. So like, just give him this name, and he gives him like some old movie star name, so we know it's you. Because they were worried about the police finding him, because when he called them, he was like, "Yo, I think I killed a guy," and they were like, "Fuck, are we accessories to murder now? Wait, don't use your real name anywhere." Which, point to this book author actually showing some level of like thought with the characters. I feel like most books we read like this, the characters are just dumb as fucking bricks and like would not think of that. So, anyway, they rush to the shelter, which is, a several hours drive, and he's not there. And they're like, "Oh my God," and they're like asking the receptionist, like, "Are you sure? Like, we need to see him." And she's like, "Well, I don't know. He might come back." And so they're like, "We don't know what to do." And so they start looking for him, and then they, I don't know, get bored and they eat sushi and go to the zoo and like do tourist stuff, which to me really took away the sense of urgency and emergency of the situation. I was like, look, man, if my friend was missing and I thought he had a break with reality and might have killed a dude, I would be pounding that pavement until I found him. Like, I
understand it's New York City. It's like finding a needle in a haystack in some ways, but like you could try to start looking in some place, right?
Don't they not even go to the World Trade Center until like way later? And you're like, the fuck, was that your first guess?
Yeah. Okay, so we slipped a little bit possibly into moment to moment, but not entirely. Yes. And so I want to score this plot construction section here. I really want to give some credit. There is some skill in emotional writing happening here.
Yeah, minor.
But, yeah, again, it's the +1 modifier here. But I don't know if I want to give this a 0. I'm definitely not giving it a 1.
No.
I think I'm leaning more towards -1 overall.
Yeah, because it's hard to forget the purpose of this, right?
Yes.
Actually, the dual purpose, both of which are absolutely terrible. One is the obvious one we've already talked about at length, which is to denigrate the idea of fantasy role-playing and to paint a simple game as though it is evil and can cause breaks with reality and mental illness, and that younger people should never engage in this kind of thing, which is absolutely absurd on its face. But the second kind of thing undergirding all of this is that this is based on a real story, and the real story is much more tragic and also has nothing to do with D&D being evil. And Rona Jaffe was just one of several people who cashed in on a tragedy that they were unrelated to, which I think is like extra fucked up. Yeah, I can...
Did you catch the part at the back of the book where it gave you the standard, like, all characters and events in this are fictional. Any resemblance to character are entirely coincidental. And I wrote a note that was like, is it coincidental?
It's not. So I will very quickly recap what actually happened in reality that inspired this book and others like it, or I should say that this book ripped off for profit. It's a fucked up thing to do. So there was a kid named James Egbert III, and he was a student at Michigan State University who disappeared for about a month in 1979. And it was really weird. No one knew where the fuck he was. And then, eventually he popped up somewhere else. He had just he was having a bad time. He was very young. He entered university at age 16, similar to some of the characters in the book. And he was a computer science major. He just had a lot of parental pressure. He had mental health problems, drug addiction. And there is some evidence to believe that he was struggling with figuring out that he was gay. So all of that was hard. You're 16, you're in college, you think you might be gay, your parents are pressuring you to continue to be a child prodigy, and then you also have mental illness and are addicted to various drugs. That would cause issues with anyone. I feel like that's a big heaping pile of problems, and trying to deal with that stuff on your own is going to result in some tragedy. So anyway, he disappears for like a month. So this is sort of the book where JJ is like, I'm sad. I don't really have a girlfriend, and I'm going to go to the tunnels and maybe do some drugs and die. That's like sort of what happened here. So James leaves his dorm, writes a suicide note, goes into the steam tunnels under the university, and this is Michigan State. He took some drugs, thought he was going to die, but he ended up surviving, wakes up the next day and is like, all right, I guess I'm alive still. Then goes to like a tabletop role-playing convention, and other people see him there, so he's like clearly fine. I mean, not fine, but he's alive and people know where he is. But this is before the internet, so people at the university, his parents and stuff, like still didn't know where he was. Eventually, there's a private investigator his parents hire who tracks him down. And he's just like, I don't know, man. I'm under too much pressure. I just kind of want to be left alone. And, he just sort of was a kind of a vagrant and then eventually did, unfortunately, commit suicide about a year later after the incident. So he died pretty young at 17. So it's really a sad, tragic story and had nothing to do with D&D. The only reason that ever became connected to the case was because he did play role-playing games. And I don't know, the police like found out about it and they made that connection themselves. They were like, oh, they've been LARPing in the steam tunnels below the school, so D&D must be a secretive cult. I don't know. Like, it was literally just made up out of fucking thin air. They just found out that he played this game and that some kids at the school were like LARPing under the school, and then it became a thing. So anyway, I think it sucks that people would use this to make a buck. It's clearly a really sad story. And it's additionally troubling that Rona Jaffe wrote this and used it as like a cautionary tale to not play D&D when in fact that had zero to do with the original story. I don't know. It's one of those like I wrote, it's not really fictional, but it is just so I can get away with this stuff, right? Like that's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, terrible thing. Poor kid. I really hate when people make these cash grabs at tragedy. It's just, I don't know. It's a huge bummer.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said at the end of the book, it's like anything relating to real life is coincidental. It's like, no, you directly ripped this story and then wrote a little bit of fiction around it. So, it's frustrating.
-1.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit with -1 on that. Yeah. Dialogue and prose. I don't know. We can read some selections and call it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I want to find a section that demonstrates a little bit of the skill around emotional writing. I think that would be a good place to start.
I think this is a good demonstration of how dumb kids can be about emotional stuff. Next to him was one of the prettiest girls Robbie had ever seen. She had shiny brown hair and huge dark eyes, and her lips turned up at the corners even when she wasn't smiling. JJ Stereo was playing Donna Summer singing MacArthur Park. JJ! Robbie shouted, holding up his bottle of wine. JJ steered him in like a ship to port. This is Kate Finch, he said, Robbie willing. Hi, she said, and smiled, and held out her surprisingly hard little hand for him to shake. After all the loves in my life, you'll still be the one, the record played. Donna singing, the beat of the music rocking through the room. Every time you fall in love, you notice what song is playing, and you always remember it. Robbie looked at Kate Finch and knew that she would always be the record of Donna Summer singing MacArthur Park. He looked into her eyes and couldn't think of a thing to say to her. Just dumb, like, first of all, there's not always going to be music playing when you fall in love with someone. But that just seems like a very, like
putting a lot of value on that is a very youthful thing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, yes, it's stupid, but it's also an accurate kind of stupid for kids. All right, so this is when Kate and Daniel go out. They go to a bar together just as friends, because she's having some sads about breaking up with Robbie. Do you want him back? Daniel asked. She looked down at her hands, the little hands that could deliver a stunning karate blow. Oh man, that was a hell of a sentence to start with. Jesus Christ, sorry. No, she said. It was a shock at first, but in a way, we're better friends now than we ever were. I still love him, but in a different way. It's not romantic, it's more real, I guess. Robbie is a genuinely nice person, Daniel said. Look what happened with you and that shit Steve. He wouldn't even stay around to say hello once in a while. You know love affairs break up every 5 minutes around here. You're not going through anything that was your fault. How can you be so sure? Because I know you would never do anything that could drive any man away. People just leave. He was being so nice, she was touched. She looked at his sexy mouth, and for one moment she thought that if she were ever to get involved again, she would risk it with Daniel. And then she thought, no. You leave people all the time, she said. Why? They leave me too, he said. I bet they don't. Who's the authority, you or me? I guess you are, Kate said. And for the first time, felt very cheered up. He was human after all. Well, when these heartless women leave you, why do they? They get bored. They weren't looking for anything serious in the first place. I don't expect more from strangers than they're willing to give. Strangers? Kate said. In a way, he said. His eyes were so blue. Poor Daniel, she thought. It can't be much fun going to bed with strangers all the time. None of the girls he went to bed with ever seemed jealous of the others, or at least they never showed it, and it occurred to her how insecure that must make him feel. I bet lots of girls were in love with you, she said. Only about 100, he said, and grinned to show he was kidding. I bet they were and you didn't know it. Hey, she said, everybody around here thinks I'm super stud. You know what that does to any woman who's sensitive and caring and smart? She says, oh, this guy is bad news. He's going to use me for another notch on his belt, so I'll use him for the same thing. Kate, if I really cared about someone, I'd have a hell of a time trying to convince her. My reputation, as they say, has preceded me. I never thought about that, Kate said. Think about it. When I tease you, do you mind? No, of course not. I bet you had fun getting your reputation, though. I can't say I hated it. I guess it's like a woman being too pretty, Kate said. She starts to think men are just after her for her looks. I never thought about that before. I have a theory about success, Scott Adams said. No, Daniel said. Success does not turn a person...
You gotta season your vegetables.
Yeah. Success does not turn a person into a big shit. If he's a shit in the first place, becoming a success only enables him to be what he always was, openly and with impunity. And if he's nice to start with, he stays nice, right? That's my theory. Come on, let's go out and I'll buy you a beer. Okay, Kate said. Let me just get my coat. They drove to Fat City in her car because Daniel only had a bicycle. Kate realized it was the first time she and Daniel had ever been out together alone. For some reason, she was having a little difficulty breathing. This is ridiculous, she thought. He's my old pal. I know him the way no one else does. He's Nimble the charlatan. He's part of my secret world, and I'm part of his. Fat City was crowded. Noisy groups were eating and drinking at nearly all the tables. They had to look for an empty table, and while they were working their way there, people they knew said hello, but more said hello to him than her, and most of the ones who spoke to him were beautiful girls. I'd be jealous, Kate said. Huh? If I were going with you and all those women said hello to you, I'd be jealous. What would you do? He asked, sounding pleased and amused. Would you give me a karate chop? She laughed. Karate isn't for jealous lovers, it's serious business. They finally sat at a small table at the back of the room and ordered draft beer. Daniel got up and put some money in the jukebox. Kate looked around the room, quite sure neither Robbie nor JJ would be there, but hoping anyway that they were not. If they were, they would come over to the table and sit down. This was the first time she'd had a chance to find out what Daniel was really like, and she intended to find out as much as she could. They'd become friends through the game and had spent all that time together, but really each knew very little about each other's private thoughts, until tonight. He came back to the table. Would you think it was terribly corny if I asked you to tell me your life story? Kate said. It's not as corny as my life story, Daniel said. But since it's also luckily very short and dull, I'll be glad to. She found his life immensely reassuring. It was so normal, so nice. Robbie's life had been sad, and JJ's bizarre, and even her own had been disillusioning, but Daniel had a real life, the kind people wish they had. She could see him in her mind, the loved child growing up surrounded by the encouragement of his family, and she wondered, as she often had before, why he had chosen to bury himself at a university like Grant. Nothing is ever like it seems, Kate thought. This was turning out to be one of her favorite evenings. Why did you pick this school? She asked. It's what I wanted. But you could have gone to MIT, Kate said. Well, that's what my parents wanted. You didn't do it to spite them. I can't imagine that. No, I came here because I really don't think I'm ambitious or competitive. I want to make up games for computers and have a quiet life with a lot of fun in it. I guess if I were growing up in the 60s, I'd be a dropout. This is sort of my compromise. And besides, Grant isn't a bad school. Why did you come here? That's where I got in, Kate said. Grant is an Ivy League, but as you say, it isn't a bad school either. It has a good creative writing department. I can go out for honors and write a novel as my thesis. Can't do that at every college. I wish I could make up a computer game for my thesis, Daniel said. Why don't you ask them? They might like the idea. I think I will, he said, very pleased. Thank you. Any old time. They had another beer. Let me ask you something, Kate said. Have you noticed Robbie acting kind of strange lately? What kind of strange? Well, he gave Tony Nelson his shirt just because Tony said it was a great-looking shirt. Daniel shrugged. Tony Nelson is on a partial scholarship and has a part-time job to help get through college. I think that was just a nice thing for Robbie to do. And lately he's been paying for everything. He probably figures we've been taking advantage of JJ, and I think we have. Kate sighed. It was so difficult to explain. And now that Daniel put it in this light, it seems so normal. How could she tell him it wasn't one thing or the other, but little bits and pieces that added up to a new and different Robbie? Maybe it's my writer's imagination, she said. It's like... Don't laugh. It's like Robbie is taking being a holy man out of the game and putting it into his life. He did laugh. You're laughing, she said. Kate, you're so creative. You're wonderful. I really don't think Robbie is turning into Pardew, nor are you turning into Glacia, nor am I turning into Nimble. I haven't stolen a thing lately, or even written a bad check. If anything, the game is an outlet for our fantasies. We work out all of our problems in the caverns, and then we leave them there. What problems do you work out? I think I just play the game, Daniel said. Liking the game more than studying is my problem. Mine too, she said. I guess you're right about Robbie. I'll try not to worry anymore. When they drove back to the dorm, Kate felt happier than she had in a long time. She'd always thought of Daniel as her friend, but now he was really her friend. For the first time since Robbie had become impotent, she didn't feel like there was something wrong with her. She felt just fine. In the dorm coming in, she and Daniel passed Robbie in the hall. He smiled at them beatifically, with absolutely no curiosity in his eyes, and they smiled back and said hi. JJ would have asked them where they'd been, afraid he was missing something. Robbie, apparently, didn't care.
Okay, so quite a lengthy passage, but I think that's a great illustration of my point that there is skill here in emotional writing.
About this particular age group, I think. Like teenagers kind of just coming to terms with life and also how talking to a friend can help you figure stuff out, right? Like, and that you can be sad about something, talk to your friend and be like, you know what? I think I'm going to be okay, right? Like handling a breakup in a responsible way. Yeah, there is, again, it's sort of like when Sweet Valley High went to college. That's what this feels like to me. Yeah.
I just want to give credit where credit is due here.
Oh no, I agree.
And like the dialogue there also felt pretty good.
I think the dialogue feels normal, except when the parents, when any adults are talking, that's when shit veers into Terrible territory.
They're like caricatures of like stereotypical mom who harangues you about things, or the dad that's just like in the corner going like, I don't know about that, honey. Like that's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, the parents act really weird. Like Kate's stepmom gives her lingerie for Christmas, which is just
they let you do whatever in the 70s, I guess.
And then there's a part that her mom says too that was just really strange. We also forgot that this author committed another author sin of putting herself in the book as Kate, as a female author, I think, or writing student or whatever.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, there's also this amazing scene where her dad is like living his best life. Like, yeah, was he a fuck who cheated on her mom and then left her for a younger woman? Yes, but they were not happy together. So whatever. He's got like a hot tub and a nice house, and Kate goes over to visit them and she doesn't really want to. But they're in the hot tub. They got cold wine, they got snacks, they got fresh tea with mint. And, like, they're hanging out in the hot tub, and then all of a sudden her dad goes, Kate, I want to tell you why men get divorced. It's like, what?
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Just the way that a man and a girl are dating, and she's very seductive, very attainable, she's sexy. He falls in love with that girl. Then they get married, they have children, and suddenly she's living the marriage script her parents taught her. She thinks a home has to be a safe, boring place where the children can grow up. She wants it to be boring. She's not sexy anymore. She can't help it. It's the way she was brought up. The home has to be a haven for the children. The man wants more. He leaves. Thanks, Dad. Great.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why Kate's like, I really don't fucking like coming over here with my stepmom, man.
Pretty weird.
But, okay, so that's a good sort of like how the parents tend to be sort of thing. And again, like a little bit too much detail here.
Oh my God,
I appreciate trying to give us some background into Kate's like upbringing, But you could have just been like, yeah, my stepdad says like misogynistic shit all the time.
Again,
and my mom
little
ended up
vignettes.
just dedicating her life to me and my sister.
Little vignettes, little memories or moments. We don't have to have chapters and chapters of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, but parents, I still want to give this book a 1 in terms of like the prose, because the sin that we're sort of foisting upon it is that there's too much of it, which is a construction thing, a plot thing, but I don't think that's necessarily a point against the skill of the writing and the prose.
I mean, I don't know. I still think the story was kind of... I feel like I'm going to settle on a 0 for this, because I don't think the story was engaging enough. I do think that...
But that's more plot, right? That that's less like how each moment happens and like, you know, how as you're reading sentence to sentence, which I think is a little bit the spirit of this category.
All right, fine. You do what you want, Chris.
Okay. I want to give a 1 on this one. I'm trying to be fair and reasonable.
I don't want to be fair and reasonable to this. This one is terrible, to be honest with you. To write a book like this and publish it and profit off of the tragedy of some kid she didn't know.
Oh, yeah, that
and then
sucks.
also try to demonize a whole game that she knows nothing about. Like, fuck you.
There's even, like, they do a weird, like, at one point a dice is rolled, and I was like, wait, what check just happened here? They, like, rolled a dice, and, like, it's a 12, and, like, that affected sub. I have that's, like, you gotta have a specific reason to do a check,
I don't know. I mean,
the internal DM
this
coming
is
up.
also, like, very early versions of D&D, so I've never played early editions, so I don't really know how they roll. Haha.
You need a reason to perform a check. That's
yes, but I also
thing.
wouldn't assume that editions made decades ago that I've never played operated the same as the ones we play now. So
I've read some of the
okay.
The only thing I haven't really read through is like first edition.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess this was like sort of around second edition AD&D. So like around then, I think they were like, yeah, you're rolling a dice to check things, not just randomly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I still want to give this a 1. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I'll forgive you someday.
Okay. So then we can move into Terriblo's presence. And to me, only in the 80s satanic panic over a fucking imaginary dice game. What is it with parents and like kids playing games like that? Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon were like a huge like, oh my god, my kids are going to be ruined because they put down their trap card and attack your life points or what. Like, what is the hang up about this?
I don't know either. I've always found that really weird because I grew up, for all the faults of my childhood, I did not suffer from this. My parents were pretty pro gaming. Like I had video games from pretty young age and played them a lot. And my parents thought that they were good because they helped me think and solve puzzles and stuff. So I don't know. And like I guess I didn't play D&D until I was an adult, but it was never demonized. I mean, honestly, when I was younger, I thought I was too cool for it. I thought it was only for deep nerds. I didn't know I was also a deep nerd. It took me a while. Mm-hmm. But
you have to shed that skin.
Yeah, I don't understand though. Yeah, I think some of it is just the sort of the set dressing, right? Because there's like demons and magic, and a lot of sort of Christian people are scared of that kind of thing, which doesn't make sense to me at all. But I really
don't get it either.
Yeah.
I can totally understand having limitations or like screen time or like you can't be playing video games all the time. You still get that's totally completely reasonable. But like the panic over like it's got monsters in it and devils, it's going to corrupt my child. Like, you guys realize that half the time we're, like, slaying the mod. Like, it's about having the strength to overcome the devil.
Yeah, and also, like, I don't really see a problem with changing perspective. Like, I know one of my friends played a game where it was, like, a one-shot, and the surprise was that everyone's character was actually a monster. Like, one person was, like, a gnoll, and somebody else was, like, a bugbear or whatever. And role-playing games help you see things from other perspectives, if they're good. I mean, some role-playing games are trash, but
yeah.
And it's a good exercise. So, I also am routinely confused by this. I really feel like, I mean, obviously there's been a ton of talk and study about Satanic Panic moments in history and how certain celebrity personalities push some things and how kids were often convinced by authority to say things were happening to them that weren't in some very famous legal cases. I'm not going to go into this here. You can read about it yourselves. But yeah, I am still kind of amazed that this has persisted in various ways. Like, remember when a bunch of parents thought Harry Potter was evil? I mean, now we know it's evil for different reasons, but not not the reasons everyone thought initially.
Got there just a different way, really.
Yeah, so I don't know, really bizarre, but yeah, I think Trilo's presence was here in that we're reading a book where someone's really trying to demonize a fucking tabletop game. And also some of the parents were, I feel like, Terriblo's tentacles. Just that's why there were so many parents. All of the tentacles had to come out, you know.
Just individual tentacles finding its way into our brain. I could go either 0 or negative. I don't know if it's a -1, like some of the fully chaos.
I feel like it's like a 0. I feel like it's a solid 0.
Yeah, I'm happy to give it a 0 on that one.
All right.
And then we move into should this exist?
Oh boy.
Would readers of this genre enjoy this?
No one...
I guess if you're an 80s soccer mom with concerns over what this whole D&D thing is, and you like your books to talk way too much about the emotional state and sex life of tertiary characters, sure.
I don't know, man. The writing in this book just didn't come off to me as very adult. It came off as like kind of young adult, but I guess you're right. Maybe this was for anyone. This is like a mass market, like supermarket book, right? So
I think I read a little bit about how Rona Jaffe was like considered chick lit.
Oh, okay.
For her time. Like I think that like she was marketed as such.
Well, and I also know that her first book was very, very well received, and so I think she was just like, oh, I can do whatever I want now, and then this happened, and I don't know.
Fuck this.
I don't know. But yeah,
I mean,
what is the genre?
If you're that very specific, like young adult thriller, I don't know.
I can't.
I would call it a thriller.
It's not a thriller. I can't imagine who would enjoy this. I really don't know.
That's extremely specific niche that I just described.
Yeah.
Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? And I guess if to serve that demographic that I mentioned, sure, but the story was a lamed attempt at denigrating D&D, and it didn't even really work in the favor of that because it didn't even connect it really that much to it. So
and again, cashing in on the idea of tragedy porn, because like the real kid, like James Egbert's story was taken, as far as I know, not in conjunction with his family or anything. So that part also really fucks me up. Like, did the author do whatever she wanted? Yeah, but do I think that was a cool goal to have? Absolutely the fuck not. No, thank you.
Okay, well, then, does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? And I suppose the idea of, like, writing a novel around D&D based things happening in it was somewhat novel at the time, even though, as you mentioned in our notes here, it's not the only one that did that.
Yeah,
so
I guess
not a little. And did it take something from us? I mean, from me, not really. It was in my regular schedule, and I feel like it did take precious sleep hours from you.
It did take precious sleep from me. Yeah. All right.
Give you a mild sanity debuff, let's say.
Yeah. I have a disadvantage to sanity checks for the rest of the day because of this book.
You failed that saving throw last night.
Oh, I did. All right. I don't think this should exist. I strongly believe this should not exist. Because
negative
it wasn't
one here.
Like, because I don't think it gave anything positive to the world, right? Like, it's unnecessary demonization of a fucking game. It also stole a real story from someone who had a very tragic end to their life, and I think profiting off of something like that when you're not involved with it and also not using it as a vehicle for something good is just not great practice. I don't think it's ethical to do that, I guess is what I would say. So that rubs me the wrong way. So I don't think this should exist at all. Mm-hmm. This is definitely one of those where I'm like, nah, we could have skipped this. Especially since the private detective who the family hired in the real life case wrote his own book capitalizing on his involvement. At least he was involved, although he also, apparently the book he wrote also has some problems. And then there was a third person who wrote something too, so it's just a mess.
Yeah. No thanks.
Nope, that's a no thanks from me.
So hard -1 on that. And I believe that brings us to overall score. We have a 1 for technical construction. We have a -1 for plot construction. We have 1 for dialogue and prose.
Okay.
We have 0 for Terriblo's presence. And we have a -1 for should this exist. So a 0 out of 5.
All right. Actually, not too bad.
Yeah. Okay, can we fix it, Paris? I think, I'm not 100% opposed to a story.
Yeah, I think we could fix this. Yeah.
Someone taking D&D way too seriously.
I think it could be good if done sorry, I'll let you finish. Yeah.
It's really tropey here, and Robbie's mental break should have been something that wasn't a full 100% split personality thing. If you treat it with more care, like say he's using the cavern exploration to unconsciously look for something, even though he's not sure what it is, that could have been more nuanced. Or like he starts using the general concept of mazes and dungeons as a way to start looking for his brother, like the world is the maze and the treasure is his brother, and like he slowly slips away based on that, or that like makes him make worse and worse decisions over time because he's putting too much credence into that way of thinking. Sure, you could, and that's even really hackneyed still.
No. I still feel like there could have been something here if the focus was on how unaddressed trauma can produce negative outcomes in anyone, especially young people who are emotionally immature. And if the D&D stuff was just kind of the backdrop and wasn't so explicitly demonized and like put forth as the direct causation of like his break with reality, like I think this could have, like I said, it sort of gives off those young adult, those like 80s 90s young adult novel vibes, and this could have been done just fine, again, like you said, if it was treated with a little more reverence, and if we are not sitting here and saying that playing a game causes mental illness. Like I can't with that. But yeah, you have a point. Like there is a way this could be fixed. So I don't know. I mean, obviously at this point that's not happening. It's been quite some time. So
it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all in all, thank you, patrons, and thank you, Luchek, especially for recommending this one to us. Thank you to our patrons and Ko-fi donors like our bad bookworms, Emily, Ben, Renee, Scott H. Donnie, Anya, Lycoris, Yakub, Jared, and Will. Our exacting editors, Rudy Bobooty, The Ugly One, Emmy, Harry 7, Funny Robot with Antennas, David, Martin S., Kieran D., and Greg. Our loathsome librarians, Yonka of the Void, the Taco-Eating Unicorn, Robin, Austin, Patricia, Beast with the Least, Veronica, Luchek, especially Luchek, Senia, and Arant. Our pesky publishers, Julius the Nice Dragon and Miles May. And of course our Ko-fi donors like the ever-faithful quarterly donating Kiwi Thing, and Martin F. and Brenna, who helped relieve us of terrible books. If you want some terrible books we've read for the show, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page.
Also, I have more of them. I just haven't listed. So if you're looking for something, just ask us. I am happy to send it to you for a small fee.
Yes. Will anyone accept the challenge to become an archivist this year? What heinous, monstrous tome full of mazes and monsters will you force us to read?
Oh.
Okay. Thanks again, everyone, for supporting the show. All right, Paris, I am off to go. You know what? I actually really want to run a one-shot again at some point. I miss it just a little bit. I don't want to do a whole campaign again. I don't even think I'm the greatest DM in the world, but it's kind of fun to do.
No, I was reminded because I had some Facebook memories come up where me, you, Tris, and a couple of other people were playing D&D like 12 years ago. It was like the first, some of the first games I played, and how fun it was because we had like a fashion paladin and people were really getting creative with their characters, and it helped. And like, I don't know, it was a really good time. I would love to do that again. I
actually have been cooking up a little one shot in the background, and I just have to have the right time and day for it and invite people.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, before we depart, you are off to play a show, right?
Yes.
Yep. Do you have any music news you'd like to share?
I mean, by the time
Yeah.
This comes out. I think I've already talked about Gobsmacked before, but why not hit it up again?
Why not again?
Hopefully the demo is at least out by now. I know the game should be coming out sometime later this year. I did all the music and some sound effects for Ash and Adam's Gobsmacked, a light roguelite kind, like small roguelite FPS arena-based kind of shootery thingy, and Paris helped me make some of the voices for the goblin player character, as well as our good friend Triss, who did some help in making some crowd noises for it that I put together into a nice gobby kind of vibe there. You can check it out on Steam, or you can head to my website, www.oselkasound.com, O-S-E-L-K-A sound, all one word.com, to check out that soundtrack. You can check it out on Bandcamp, oselkasound.bandcamp.com. All the other stuff that I've been doing as a sound guy. Hire me for your sound work, for composition and audio editing, all that fun stuff. And maybe the Graveborn album is starting to happen right now too. Maybe. As we're recording this, I'm 3 songs away from finishing all the guitar tracks. My other guitar player finished it up too. We might be doing some fun, like splitting it into more than one album kind of stuff too. So we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, be on the lookout for Graveborn stuff if you're into the death metal things. That's my pitch.
Yeah, I was very excited to be a goblin. I've always wanted to do something in video games, and Chris somehow, I don't know, I fell ass backwards into being a goblin because Chris asked me to try some stuff, and it worked out, and I got hired. So yeah, awesome. Every little screech and exaltation of destruction and Gobsmacked is me. So I hope you play the game. It looks really fun. Yeah, I don't know. I got a couple things. One thing that has already happened that I can talk about. I did a bunch of big, luscious choirs in many, many, many parts on a record it called Divine Battle. The band is called Savage Oath. So if you're into more traditional heavy metal or like epic heavy metal stuff, it's an incredible record. Regardless of my involvement, I would say that anyway. I agreed to work on the record because I think it's awesome. And yeah, it was a really different experience. I had to sing a bunch of little parts and put them all together and make these big, fluffy choirs that go behind, I think, one of the best singers of our time in this genre. So it's worth checking out if you are into that kind of thing. If you're not, that's cool. So yeah, check out Savage Oath, Divine Battle. It's really good. I will put links to this stuff in the show notes. I got one other thing I sang on this year that is, it might be out by the time this episode airs, but it, just gonna exercise a little caution and withhold until I get a release date, because it could be May, it could be June, and I don't want to fuck that up if it's not out. So yeah, I know. More music stuff to come. So hire Chris. Listen to the stuff I sang on. It's fun, but it's also fine if not. Anyway, thank you for giving us your ears again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audiovisual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com. Sorry. The one product placement in this book is Pepperidge Farm. There's one brand we see is Pepperidge Farm. Also, I love how they were like, we're gonna mark our path with food in these abandoned tunnels full of rats and mice. Like, guys, they're going to eat your croutons and your rice. You're not going to be able to get out.